and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. We are back after somewhat of an impromptu Easter break. It wasn't planned, but life got in the way. A collective head loss from the pair of us got in the way. And to be honest, Nathan, we left off before the Easter period on a pretty negative note, let's be honest, off the back of that Millwall defeat and, of course, the defeat to Leeds as well. And we're kind of right back where we were after an Easter period of sort of ups and downs, moments where you think it's in our hands, it's not in our hands, numerous opportunities to do the business and for this Middlesbrough team to finally stand up and be counted. And yet we find ourselves with one game to go. The playoffs are out of Middlesbrough's hands. And I mean, that doesn't really paint the full picture. Since we last recorded, it's been pretty dire, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, Chris. From the highs of 90th minute winners against Plymouth Argyle to following that up with, the penalty miss at Hillsborough, which would put you right in the driving seat for the playoff race, missing that penalty, the second half display being as disgusting as it was, which I'm glad that we didn't record straight after that because I know that your head was on Mars. And then going into Saturday, seeing Coventry stumble at lunchtime, the big roar from the concourse before kick-off yesterday, the players roared on to the pitch at the Riverside before kick-off, and then just flat and insipid performance at home once again. Didn't really lay much of a glove on Norwich, a team that had sacked their manager leading into this game, and a team that has nothing to play for. A nice fixture that you'd say is a real opportunity to strike and lead the way into the final fixture with a hell of a lot to play for. But as we've seen over the last 4 months, really, since January, but throughout the season as a whole, this team just doesn't have it within them to stand up and sort of show any sort of urgency and drive to be able to grasp that opportunity. It was just, as I say, flat. And yeah, a lot of fans are dejected, but I'd say that I'm more apathetic, really, and have been for quite a while now about this Boro team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summed it up perfectly, to be honest. It still didn't make me any less angry at full-time yesterday, and as you say, at full-time against Sheffield Wednesday. But look, obviously, because of the point in which we left off on, there's obviously been a number of games since and a number of games for our playoff rivals. It's pointless us going right the way back to Plymouth. As you say, a late winner puts you in a position where you look at a relatively favourable run-in for Middlesbrough, let's be honest, out of the teams in and around you, and you think, we've done okay against kind of these teams with not really too much to play for over the last few weeks. Got ourselves in a position where you're competing again, and yeah, you think it's all to play for. And obviously, as I say, that momentum, you hope that continues on to Sheffield Wednesday, and it kind of felt a little bit. And look, my dad's been watching Middlesbrough for long enough now where he's very much a Middlesbrough fan that is glass half empty instead of glass half full. And I don't blame him one bit. And for any Middlesbrough fans that have, I mean, a Middlesbrough fan that's watched us just this season alone would probably have that perspective on the football club and watching us week in, week out. But he said to me as Tommy Conway stepped up for that penalty, if Tommy Conway scores, I genuinely think we're going to make the playoffs. If he misses, I'll tell you exactly what will happen. And it'll be the exact same outcome as Norwich. And I thought, even then, there's a lot of football to be played. Come on, Dad, I try to be the one in the. We watch all the games together, and I'm kind of the one in that relationship that's like, come on, this. I can see where you're going, and obviously you've watched us for long enough to know. But come on, there's still a lot of football even to play if he misses that penalty. Of course, that very thing happens. Tommy Conway has his penalty saved. We then produce Yet again, a performance where Middlesbrough lead and throw away points. The manner in which we threw away the points, all of the additional context, the fact that Sheffield Wednesday hadn't been paid the month prior, the home fans was very much, they were going to that game to express their opinions on the ownership. It felt very much like Blackburn, and had that penalty have been stuck away, I think it would have been the exact same type of occasion, really. And then from then, you get basically a team and a performance that just completely folds under pressure. And you come into today's game and you think, either way, really, if Coventry win, we still know what we have to do yesterday. We had to win yesterday, and we had to basically make it so that if we go to Coventry on the final day and win, it's still in our hands. It's in our control. And as you say, there was that big roar, but you talk about apathy. And I think the best place to start, because to be honest, there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of Middlesbrough's performance yesterday, would just be the general shaping of the mood amongst fans. And I guess potentially how that may have even impacted the performances. And I think the best place to start with that is some of the comments from Michael Carrick over the Easter period, some of the absolutely baffling quotes that he's come out with in his press, and just his lack of understanding about how important it is to get your press right, and not only for your players, but also to use it as a tool to speak directly to match-going fans that are paying hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pounds over the course of the season. So I think it really started with the Plymouth game, which ultimately we did win, but comments prior to the game to say it's not a must-win game. Straight away you're thinking, and ironically enough, that weekend everyone did do their job, despite the whole of the playoff race kind of trying to, give everyone else the ticket into the playoffs and mess it up. It did actually transpire that had Tommy Conway have not scored that penalty, Middlesbrough would have had an absolute mountain to climb to be anywhere near the playoffs going into the final 3 games. I think it would have been at that stage. So I guess he kind of gets out of jail a little bit with that one. Last week, he follows up a disgusting second half performance. A team who had nothing to play for, as I say, hadn't been paid. A manager that said in the week prior that if his players perform like they have done post-Christmas, and I should also add, a home team that hadn't won up until they played Middlesbrough since New Year, I think.
New Year's Day, yeah.
He follows that defeat up with, well, it hasn't really changed too much. We've been a little bit fortunate, but, it's still in our hands. Not, we've been very fortunate here. We've been extremely lucky, because that was nowhere near good enough, nowhere near the levels that I expect my team to perform at, and nowhere near a performance of a team that want to go and get themselves promoted. And then in terms of setting the tone, setting the atmosphere in a game where, as I said, regardless of the Coventry result, if anything, that was going to give this team a boost. You've got to get out the blocks quickly. You've got to make up for that disaster away at Sheffield Wednesday. And you've got to really set the precedent for a team who are literally coming and on the beach, as you say, who have got literally nothing to play for. And what does he come out and do? He comes out and says, well, I don't really think it's unsuccessful if we don't make the playoffs this season. What kind of message does that set to the players, to the fans, to the staff about coming from the man at the top? Okay, not Steve Gibson, but the aspirations of what kind of levels of discipline, what standards he's setting. And I know I'm not stupid enough to genuinely believe that he said that to the players before they've gone out yesterday, that, lads, it's fine, we don't need to win, the result's gone our way again. But in terms of, as I say, going back to using the media as a tool to speak to the fans, does he honestly believe that supporters are that stupid, that they genuinely view the £580 or 600 quid, whatever it is, and all of the money that they've spent travelling to away games, yourself and your granddad, part of the amazing following to Sheffield Wednesday again, that it's just going to wash to say, well, different things have happened, and it's not really kind of the way that we want to measure the season, looking at the final sort of standings and where we sit. And if we do miss out, then almost saying that that's okay. And to be honest, I've got to say, I found it incredibly patronising, to be honest. I think throughout this season, one thing that Carrick's got majorly wrong is how he's basically, over the course of especially the last few weeks and when he was under pressure, he's made, and especially his interviews with Mark Jury, he's kind of made it him versus Jury or him versus the media. And largely what he doesn't seem to be able to grasp is the journalists are asking questions for the most part. And of course, people want headlines. It's the way journalism work. But ultimately, they're only asking questions that the majority of fans, if they were given a microphone in a press conference, would ask. Now he's straight away on the back foot and making it a personal thing, rather than speaking to the fans, giving a bit of perspective, a bit of reality in terms of the situation, and a little bit of understanding that people have spent fortunes and want what's best for this football club. And what's best for this football club, yes, okay, I don't expect us to get in the playoffs every season, but there was a certain level of expectation this season. And basically what he said to the fans, and the way I interpreted it, rightly or wrongly, was, doesn't matter.
Yeah, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of playing the sport, I suppose.
What's the point in turning up if it doesn't matter, Michael?
Yeah, it's not great the way that he's handled the media, especially in the last week or so with the questions that are asked. I think that the questions that have been asked to him have been justified, have been sort of exactly what the fans have been thinking, of what they've been saying on social media broadly. When I myself go on and sort of have a look at what's being said on social media, you see those questions, and that's what's being asked to him by the journalists. But yeah, it seems like it's sort of causing him a little bit of distress at times, the questions, and he's not necessarily understanding that it's not a 1v1 conversation. It is sort of all the fan base, and the media should be used as a tool to, I suppose, give your narrative to the fan base. But yeah, I think my overriding sort of views, despite his way of handling the media in the last couple of weeks, I think that he has been dealt a poor hand with the transfer dealings, especially in January, as we've spoken about. So I'm not going to dive too far into that. Obviously, the injuries, all these things have played a factor. However, I don't think he helps himself at all when his substitution of choice away at Sheffield Wednesday, as the game goes 1-1, is pulling off Morgan Whittaker and bringing Dale Fry onto the pitch. It doesn't make any sense to me that bringing a centre half on away from home in a game where the fan base are under no illusions that you need to win this game. No matter what you say in the media, you need to win this game to have any chance. And also, being in that away end on Monday, everyone in and around you is obviously checking the scores, and the results were falling favourably for us. We were 1-0 up at half time. The other two sides in Bristol City and Coventry, I think Bristol City were level at half time, but went down straight after half time, and Coventry were getting beat at half time. So you have a massive opportunity there. 45 minutes to get right at Sheffield Wednesday. Okay, you've missed your penalty in the first half. Show some steel, some drive, and bounce back from that setback. Get yourself into an even bigger lead. Go 2-0 up away from home and try and have a day away at Hillsborough that stands out in the season. that's the day where Middlesbrough stood up. They showed some real fight. They pulled through a setback and got a really good result on a day where the other teams in and around them faltered. But instead, in the second half, they absolutely melted away once again. It's not the first time this season. It happens time and time and time again. It's happened twice against Sheffield Wednesday this season, where we've absolutely shit our pants at halftime, which is truly unforgivable. The performance in that second half the other day, look, as I said at the start of the podcast, I feel more apathetic around this team, and having seen them do this time and time again, it's just sort of made me step back and think, well, I haven't got any trust in them, so what's the point in even holding out any hope that they're going to change? We didn't lay a glove on them until going 2-1 down, and we had a chance which we didn't create ourselves necessarily. Bergzorg spins round as the ball's fortunately landed towards him, flicks his foot at it, and Tommy Conway, you have to score. You have to score. You don't need to be clever and try and lift it as high as you do. My view, right behind the goal at Hillsborough, perfect gap in between two Sheffield Wednesday players who are on the turn, haven't got time to react, pass the ball in the empty net, and you've got yourself a point, which even in that circumstance would have been a poor result for us. But this team lacked any fight. They didn't stand up in that second half at all, got run all over. They were incredibly out of shape at times in terms of the second goal, especially. It's disgusting how much space Callum Patterson has on that right hand side, while everyone else has been dragged over to the other side. And the defending for that second goal, once the cross comes in from Vandenberg, it's abhorrent. It's absolutely disgusting that you can't swing your left foot at that and clear it either for a corner or for a throw-in or just away from danger. It is truly, truly horrific. And that sort of just made me sit back and think, well, this is this team. What did anyone else expect? But leading into yesterday, you had another opportunity, and again, when everyone's getting confident in the sort of the concourse before the game, seeing that Coventry result, I just think in my own mind, does this team have it within them to pull a result out when they need it most? And unfortunately, the answer's no.
No. What I was going to say in terms of the word that you used there, trust, the trust went a long time ago for me.
Exactly.
And as you say, I think that's why apathy's set in so much. And it's so disappointing because, as I said, going into yesterday, you've got the boost before balls kicked of Coventry getting beat. You have it effectively confirmed that you are 4 points away from getting into the playoffs. And all yesterday felt, barring probably about 10 minutes of pressure in the second half, was a continuation of exactly what we saw against Sheffield Wednesday. Boring, slow, far too methodical. And the irony of using the word methodical is in terms of, this young, up-and-coming, tactically wise, methodical manager that arguably sometimes we criticize him for, and his team for basically trying to score the perfect goal, trying to, have passages of play in and around the box where it's so intricate that if it comes off, it's kind of, breathtaking almost. And all that the manager and his set of coaches, if you even can call them that, his backroom staff could come up with, was to throw Dale Fry up top and lump balls into him. A player that has scored, I think, 1 senior goal for Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you're
that
lucky.
will haunt me for years to come. And do you know what's even worse? Against Plymouth, it was strange because although it took the penalty for us to score, we were knocking on the door so much that I actually felt that I always felt within me that we were going to score. Yesterday, with 20 minutes to go, other than I think Aidan Morris clips the post and it's a good save from Angus Gunn, it was as if they'd just been told that you're kind of banned from the playoffs. So even if you do score, it doesn't matter. There was no urgency. Substitutions again. I mean, he brings Force on relatively early. I think he makes the wrong change. And I mean, the fact that I'm even going to say this is quite bizarre. I actually felt Iheanacho was unlucky yesterday to be the one taken off because Morgan Whittaker was yet again pretty pathetic, to be honest. Look, I don't want to go sort of too harsh on Whittaker. It's kind of one eye on a long-term signing, but I look at January, I look at the business that we've done, and undoubtedly we've made the squad worse. Whittaker is Iheanacho has been a real bad signing and arguably one of the worst that we'll make possibly ever in our lifetimes, to be honest. But Whittaker at the moment doesn't look much better. And I think that's a sort of damning indictment of kind of what he's shown so far. I must say, BBC Tees yesterday post-match, Maddo, Dana, they were talking about the fact that in the second half yesterday, that Middlesbrough, basically, the attackers that we have all just want to occupy one space. And it's just those half spaces where you can try and get shots off. Whittaker wants to come inside and get shots off, doesn't want to go to the byline. Bergsorg wants to do the same. Finazaz, to be fair, that's the space that he should be occupying, trying to thread balls through. Should be occupying, I say, because he should be playing centrally. And for those of you that have watched and listened to this podcast throughout this season, will know that I'm not Finazaz's biggest lover, but playing him out of position is just ridiculous to begin with. And it was just honestly futile, pathetic, embarrassing watching us try and break down Norwich, because it's not like they were, clearing balls off the line and Angus Gunn was plucking shots out of the top corner. They didn't even really have to work to stop Boro from scoring. We created absolutely nothing. And all we could muster up was, yet again, kind of horseshoeing it round a little bit. Dijksteel, whose form has kind of just fallen off a cliff, getting the ball out wide, occasionally managing to go back to Johnny Howson to try and push us up the pitch or take a little bit of responsibility, and largely giving it away for the most part. And yeah, for me, it was just summed up yesterday. The Bergsorg substitution, he's been largely praised for somewhat of this season, especially the second half. And I think in that terrible run of 5 or 6 defeats, whatever it was, he was actually Boro's best player off the left. And I can understand his frustration. I can, because he was then taken out of the team and then he's not really had an opportunity off the left. But even his attitude yesterday, I mean, Huddersfield fans warned us. It was just the pettiness of kind of tripping over his own bottom lip when he wasn't allowed to take the penalty of Plymouth has just kind of continued. He come onto the pitch against Sheffield Wednesday, didn't look bothered yesterday. Had one run, in fairness, where he cuts it back and we nearly scored off, which was quite good. But moping round, kind of throwing his hands up in the air, even from what I saw from the lap of honour, which, by the way, we'll get on to because I left. I didn't even want to show them any appreciation, or the management staff, because frankly they don't deserve it, in my opinion. And that just summed it up for me yesterday, him plodding around with kind of the attitude of, oh well, it's everyone else's fault. And there was some performances yesterday. Aidan Morris, he tried. Hayden Hackney tried to push us up the field, but ultimately, through a lack of quality and a mentality that has just been absolutely embarrassing throughout the second half of the season, especially. I just felt so defeated yesterday, and even still today. And I mean, we can still get in the playoffs, and it's not going to happen. There's kind of 3 or 4 results that need to happen. And funnily enough, like the thought that we actually would beat Coventry on the last game of the season is one of those that needs to happen. So that's a laugh in itself, which is obviously not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, looking at, I seen Doak going to sit like behind the subs bench, and just thought, how far have we fallen even since? And do you know what? I seen a stat this week that since Emmanuel Latilaf and Doak last played, the sort of difference in like points per game isn't actually that much difference. But in terms of when we talk about mentality, and you spoke about it last podcast, a teenager in his first season of senior football, other than probably Hayden Hackney, has the biggest balls out of any of that squad or any of the management staff to actually take a little bit of responsibility to go and say, no, this isn't happening. I'm going to try and make a difference regardless. And as I say, there was possibly Hackney. He's going to move on at the end of this season and will go on to much better and bigger things than this football club. But it was just pathetic yesterday. And in a way, I actually feel somewhat happy that it's no longer in our hands, because I can go to Coventry next week, and when they inevitably score the second, and I'm sure some of their home fans will be thinking that, you know, a lot of that away end are really devastated about watching their team capitulate at that stadium yet again. And do you know what? I'll just be accepting of it.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Because we've already accepted it. We accepted it a long time ago. And the fact that it's gone this far goes to show how truly pathetic this division is. And it has been this season. Because the fact that we are still, okay, results need to fall a certain way, but the fact that we are still mathematically able to finish within the top 6 going into the final game of the season, when we've picked up 24 points from the last 20 games, shows how shite this division is. It is truly, truly a tragedy. But hey ho, we move on to the lap of honour, Chris. You said that you didn't stay. Can't say I blame you. I thought I'd stay to sort of maybe see a couple of those players that I've enjoyed watching over this season, or the first half of this season and the last couple of years, and sort of, yeah, see them perhaps in a Boro shirt for the final time. Seeing Johnny Howson with his kids, he brings them on every season, but you just never know when his last season may be. He was the last person to leave the pitch yesterday. I'm hoping that isn't a sign. Obviously, Doak came round with the players and got serenaded by the South Stand. Truly deserved. Yeah, very sort of upsetting that he wasn't able to play a part since the end of January. I think that he would have made a difference, whether it was even just collecting a couple more points, we'd be in the playoffs. So there you go. And it'd be a little bit more enjoyable of a watch anyway, to watch him take on a fullback rather than Whitaker come inside and smash balls towards the back of the North Stand. And yeah, a couple of other players. Hackney, I expect to leave, which is a massive shame. Obviously, within this sort of system that we've employed over the last couple of years, the Brentford Brighton model of getting good players in the door and developing them and selling them. Obviously, Hackney's one of our own, came through the academy, has lived my dream, lived your dream, and he's outgrown the football club. He's too good for this team, especially this current iteration of Middlesbrough, which is yeah, truly poor. He'll probably move on, and obviously a couple of other players there as well that won't be seen in a red shirt at the Riverside once again. So yeah, but a couple of boos around the ground yesterday at half time, obviously full time as well, but a couple of boos on that lap of honour, which I don't think we've seen for a good couple of seasons now. That, and I'm not necessarily sure because I'm one person that does not necessarily agree with booing. I wouldn't boo myself ever, even if we got beat 5, 6, 7-0. I'm just not one of those that would boo, especially when you can see that they're trying. It's just that they're not good enough. But I think that some of those boos yesterday may have been aimed okay at the players for their part this season. The manager and his coaching staff at times for the decisions that they've made, both in team selection, both tactically, but possibly even towards the board a little bit, and
Possibly.
the head of football and the recruitment team for their part that they've played this season in the way that we came on this podcast at the start of the season. And I think a lot of Boro fans were of the opinion that this side was definitely good enough for the top six, that this squad was built with the aspiration of finishing within the top six. The players that were signed in the summer came and spoke in their club interviews about their aspirations for the football club and for the season, and that they were aiming for the playoffs and beyond. And I think that maybe in hindsight, when I look around at this group of players now and reflect on the season that individually that they've had, and I look and pick out certain individuals and who I thought would play a big part and who underperformed, and those players who I thought, oh well, he's a not a bad backup if someone gets injured, and they've come into the side and they've been really poor, and I look and think, why was I so brainwashed at the beginning of this season thinking that they were good enough?
Yeah, I think I've had the same thoughts, and I don't necessarily think we were wrong to not necessarily. I don't think we ever really said, thinking back, that we're going to win this league at a canter. But I think when you look at in terms of the start of the season, it was very much playoffs is kind of a minimum expectation. And then when you think to the highest level that this team reached throughout the full season, I think we would all agree it was those 3 games where we scored, 19 goals or something like that, ridiculous. QPR, Luton, and Hull, was it?
Oxford.
Oxford, sorry, yeah. And I think, would you agree that that was probably the peak of this season in terms of performance levels?
It was, but I think again, in hindsight, yeah, I would say it was the best that we've played all season. However, you look at the teams that
Okay,
we
yeah,
played.
yeah. Doak injured. That's like circumstances. Latilaf sold.
No, but also I'm saying the opposition that we played as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I understand that, but I felt, and then in and around that period as well, which shouldn't be forgotten, we went to Turf Moor and drew, which I mean, basically, if Senny Dieng had any goalkeeping capabilities, we probably would have won that game.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of your expectations, you think, okay, yeah, Latilaf went. So the second half of the season, you could argue that, well, that's a different variation of this Middlesbrough side. But the reason that I choose not to feel kind of embarrassed by what we said or wrong for what we said is, if that level of that level of performance had have been even semi-consistent across the season, then that level of football, that level of performance, and those players were more than good enough to get in the top 6. And I would argue, until anyone wanted to really, And yes, Latilaf goes and Doak goes. But we had a squad that has significantly changed, and we touched on it last podcast, has significantly changed since then. And yes, people will talk about January rightfully, that it's hard to pin it down to one thing, but that's obviously had a huge impact on Middlesbrough's season. But the recruitment staff will get a lot of stick, and you know, Kieran Scott, he's head of football. That job title comes with a lot of pressure. But ultimately, a lot of these signings were basically Michael Carrick signings as well. And I'm going to put something out there, and it's just for people to have their own thoughts on. If you look at the type of signings that we made in January compared to other windows, yes, there's been some real big misses under Kieran Scott. At the moment, you'd say Micah Hamilton, Sammy Silvera, Matthew Hoppy. They're all signings where you go, like, what's been seen there? And even with Hamilton, he's still very young, but we've seen like little to nothing of excitement from what had promised to be a really exciting signing for the football club. The signings that we made in January, I personally don't think, and they're not blameless in this because they probably should have just put their foot down and said no. How bad January went, I just can't comprehend that this current recruitment staff and Kieran Scott, it's so different to any other window that this football club has had under Kieran Scott. I just can't comprehend that can just be pinned on the recruitment team, because it's so, even the profiles of players, the ages, I don't think that people are like looking into the signings enough and saying, do we really think off Kieran Scott's track record that Kelechi Iheanacho was the signing that Kieran Scott went, go and make that happen? I don't believe it. There's noises beginning to come out of the football club now, in the Echo, in the Gazette. So, for example, in January, the football club felt very confident that they could go and get Strelec, who was clearly the name that come out once Latilaf had sold. Even going back, we said, once Latilaf goes, within a couple of days, you'll know who the number one target is because the name will come out, because then the circumstances change. You've got the money to go out and buy that player. Now it's being reported that the football club were confident of getting that deal done. They had pressure from Celtic and other clubs around Europe, but the club felt that he was their number one target to go and get. However, Michael Carrick basically opted for the experience of Kelechi Iheanacho. Now, I'm not saying that Michael Carrick has the final say and the recruitment staff couldn't have intervened and said no, but Giles, I've already admitted, we both wanted it to work. It didn't work, so I can't give him any criticism for that. Re-signing George Edmondson, I think I tried to defend it at the time, but looking back, it's an absolute shocker of a signing, really. Whitaker, I think it would be fair to say the jury's out. But for this model to work, and the success that we've kind of had up until this point in terms of slowly building a squad, and yeah, there's still squad players that we're at a point again, which is a failing of recruitment, that we are back at square one, basically. We need to rebuild again. But for this model to work, it's got to be basically fully buy-in. You don't just get a January window where the manager has slightly more say than he usually would. Look, for example, best example of this is Michael Edwards at Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp was quite, like, famously enough now, the one in that Liverpool boardroom saying, I don't want Salah. I think it was Julian Brandt that they were trying to sign. But the people that make those decisions, and this could be leveled as a criticism of the recruitment staff that they've allowed it to happen. But Liverpool's higher up said, no, we've looked at the data, we've watched more of this player than you. We see him fitting into this system better. And obviously the rest is history. I just look at this January window and see all of the blame that's being placed at the foot of the recruitment team's door. And I'll admit that it's also their responsibility to be strong and say, no, we think this is better. And we think that will suit the team better. But I can't comprehend that Kieran Scott as being the one to go out and go, Kelechi Iheanacho's your man to replace Lailaf. I just can't.
So on this point, and having done a degree in journalism, me and you have done degrees in journalism, know how it works, right?
Yeah.
It's come out this week that, yeah, Strelec, number one target to be a striker, but Carrick opted for Iheanacho. Now we know that, okay, at the time, fair enough, there was still skepticism at the time, even when that signing's being made, that, oh, I don't think Iheanacho is going to be the man. We came on this podcast in January and said, oh, it's either going to go really good or really bad. And we both think it's going to go quite bad. Anyway, the fact that this is coming out now, after the season's at an end,
Yeah.
the manager is right under pressure. I think that this is perhaps, or we made a mistake, even like slightly backing him here and giving him the man that he wants. And we're just going to say, yeah, all the blame's on him. All the blame's on him for this signing. And the likelihood is, with this being reported in the press, the likelihood of this is going to be that
it's certainly not going to come from Carrick's camp, is it?
It's not coming from Carrick's camp. And I'm going to be honest, my overall view on the situation with this sort of chain of events coming out, and obviously the form and everything towards the end of the season, is that I think its position's untenable at the football club, really, which is a shame how it's gone, especially this second half of the season. But it's completely unravelled very, very quickly. And all the things from injuries to January to the mentality of the team to tactics to substitutions, team selection, all of those things have provided a massive domino effect to where we are now, which is we're not making the playoffs, which I think it's been apparent for even a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Despite results still falling in our favour at times, this side's not good enough for the playoffs. And I think that within the summer, we're going to see, in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if we come on this podcast next week reviewing the season, which we've pretty much reviewed the season last week, this week, and probably next week as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if we come on here and the manager's been relieved of his duties, really, and we are already looking ahead to next season and planning for life under a new manager, because the way that the press has gone, especially in the last couple of months, but in weeks, it's apparent. It's apparent.
There's been a kind of twist in the narrative almost, and I think especially when you notice the local media begin to, and I'm not saying it's like they're doing it in an unfair manner or it's a big pile on. I think that actually it's very much justified, but it's when it starts to become apparent that actually the supporters aren't happy, then the press of it's their job after all, isn't it? They've got to, the local media, we've seen this football club's relationship with the press over the years, that if you do cross a line, then Steve Gibson's happy to go, don't come back. So you've got that element to look into, I guess, as well. But I think just on the topic of recruitment, and as I say, I don't want to bang the drum and go round in circles, but at the end of the day, after 20 minutes in the Sheffield United game, everyone saw Iheanacho come out with his kit on and go, is he having a laugh? Mm-hmm. Now, Michael Carrick, okay, fair enough. We did have a little bit of a relative turn of form in some very favourable fixtures, I may add, with Kelechi Iheanacho in the team. But he basically stuck with him. And again, going back to the way that he spoke about like in the media and being a little bit patronising, asked about Kelechi Iheanacho, who evidently was unfit and miles off the pace, his response, rather than to say, you know, like, he's never going to go, yeah, he's miles off, he's probably carrying about 2 stone overweight, and really it's been an absolute disaster. He's never going to say that. But the kind of brass neck to go, I don't get what all the noise is about. Like, are you all seeing something that I'm not? And then dropping him the next game. Like, come on. We're not all stupid, Michael. Like, seriously. And just, he's continued to play him. I mean, even yesterday, all of the things which I said, get out the blocks fast, you know, come flying out of that tunnel with a point to prove. The last player on the face of this earth that I'd probably think about in terms of just the word fast altogether would be Kelechi Iheanacho. He slows you down. He's sluggish. His first touch is like a trampoline. And other than a couple of nice touches here and there and a through ball for Conway against Plymouth, there's been nothing really to show the level that he's kind of got himself to in his career, which, look, he'll probably be a Boro pub quiz question in 10 years' time and we'll look back and laugh. But God, that's one player that I was certainly not going to stay and clap for at the end of yesterday's game. But on your point, and I think, look, it's pointless really us actually even sort of previewing Coventry and the possible ways that could unfold that Middlesbrough will make it into the playoffs. I will say now that if we are sitting here this time next week and Middlesbrough have made the playoffs, that I will personally invite you, Nathan, to bring, I'll perhaps even buy it. I'll buy it for you, for the both of us. I will personally buy or purchase any alcohol of your choice that we can both sit on here and just laugh our heads off for an hour that we've somehow ended up in the playoffs. That's not going to happen. But if we do, then we've got that to look forward to. But in terms of the position about the manager's position being untenable, and perhaps what next week may bring if Middlesbrough don't make it into the playoffs and they finally get that final nail in the coffin that we've been looking for a few weeks now. The main arguments that I'm almost like a silent reader of social media. I look at it a lot and I read a lot of different opinions, and it's great that so many people, especially like a platform like X or Twitter, whether I agree with some of it is a different story, but there's plenty of opinions flying around, and it's always a good place to kind of gauge where the fan base is at. I think from numerous accounts on social media. But the number one arguments really that I've seen that have been levelled at keeping Carrick would be that we play good football. I don't think we play good football. I don't think we've played good football apart from 4 games this season, the ones that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast. I don't think last season we played good football. I think we played good football when we had some really great players, the Harlem Globetrotters of championship attacks, and we still didn't get promoted. The defence ultimately was our undoing, and it has continued to be. So I'd look at the football and the progression of this team. And yes, okay, the quality, there's been a drop-off, undoubtedly. But the defence hasn't become any more shored up. The style of football, I don't really think it's apparent anymore, to be honest. I don't look at us and think this is what we're trying to do. These are the obvious tactics of a manager. For example, we tried to mirror what we had done in the Coventry defeat season in the early stages of last season, where basically we recruited Lucas Engel to play the Ryan Giles role. Seny Dieng was still going to be that key component where he invited pressure on, and Tommy Smith tucked in, and basically Middlesbrough played with a back 3 and Engel would bomb on or Bangura. Now that, personnel-wise, the fact that we didn't get Giles back is probably a large part of why that didn't work. But since then, there's been no real stylistic variation of Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough that I've gone, I know what they're trying to do. I don't. We're really reliant on Hackney. I've give Azaz loads of stick this season, but I mean, where would we be without his goals and assists, even if they were against poor sides? And I think another one which has been thrown about is, he's been let down by recruitment. We've gone down that road. But also, if we do get rid of Michael Carrick, then who are we going to bring in? Who are we going to bring in that will attract the big loan signings and the type of signings that we've made? Well, that opinion seems to be from the same camp of the recruitment hasn't been good enough. So if everyone's worried about we won't have the lure of a big name and these young players won't want to come and play for a different manager, are you telling me that there's not a different manager around Europe? Or even, look, the one name that's been quite heavily mentioned has been Steve Cooper. I personally wouldn't be against Steve Cooper. And I don't think that it would kind of be amazing, entertaining, beautiful football we'd be watching each week. But I don't think we'd get performances like yesterday and against Sheffield Wednesday. And I think, honestly, the idea that people think, and it does, I'm sure it does play a part, but we're not in a position where we're going to be going into this next transfer window with a lack of funds. The one thing that was kind of used as a bit of a positive in January was that ultimately they kind of went with the loan signing because they couldn't get Strelec really, but they didn't then want to go and spend a 10 million on Adam Armstrong and throw money and potentially risk it all in January. The fact that we didn't do that means that we're going to be in a very healthy position financially. And whatever you say about the model or selling our best players, looking at where we were in the summer of Neil Warnock and bringing in the likes of Tayosi Olasanya and Grant Hall as signings, we're in
Uche
Ikpeazu, we're in a much, much healthier position. Are you honestly telling me that it does have somewhat of an impact, I'm pretty sure, but that money doesn't talk at this level of football? If there's going to be a choice of a top player joining a Norwich, let's say, if Jack Wilshere gets the job, or a Steve Cooper's Middlesbrough, who have aspirations of the playoffs and can pay you a little bit more because they've got a big war chest from the sale of Emmanuel Latilaf, that's going to make that much difference that they'd go, I'd rather go and play for Jack Wilshere. He had a better playing career. It's bullshit, to be honest. So there's arguments there, and somewhat of it I do agree with, but I am very much in your boat that what is the point in wasting time? Like, we have not seen this Middlesbrough team and Michael Carrick's coaching ability. The same issues have been apparent from last season and even the closing stages of the season where we got beat off Coventry in the playoffs. He still makes substitutions too late. The defence hasn't shored up. Since, as I say, we've lost Giles and funnily enough, signed him back and not used him in that way, we've never had that style of play since, or any like makeup or like obvious on the eye tactic to say this is how Middlesbrough play football. I just don't see any worlds. And it's not that I hate Michael Carrick, but through what I see on the pitch and the way that he's reacted recently with his basically the players can do no wrong approach, I just don't see how we can continue. And I think if you do stick with Michael Carrick, that probably 10 games into next season will be in the exact same position and will have wasted 10 games and then you'll have to sack him anyway.
Are you excited for Coventry next week?
I can't wait, Nathan. Yeah, it should be a superb afternoon.
Yeah, it's a sorry state of affairs the way that the season's petered out from January really onwards, from finding ourselves in not the best position at Christmas, but certainly a position where you're hoping that you can push on in the second half of the season and, well, mount a playoff push. Find yourself in a situation where you're sort of locked in to the playoffs, and you're trying to build some momentum heading into them with, well, around this period, which, yeah, we failed to do. Our season's petered out really based around a period in January, February where everything went wrong. The recruitment, the players on the pitch, and the results were truly shocking for over a month, in which we lost 6 games on the spin and lost ground in the playoff race, and also gave ground up to teams like Coventry, who hadn't been anywhere near at the start of the season. And look, they changed manager midway through the season and got a bounce, and they are where they are now. Okay, they've got to turn up next week and get themselves a result. But I'm going to be honest, I'd personally written this game off as soon as the fixtures had came out at the start of last season. We'll be lucky to register a shot on target, never mind a goal at the CBS. We never score there. I think the last time we did was something like 2013. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if we're a couple of goals down next week at half time and me and you are going around the corner to the casino, if I'm honest. What is
Yeah,
the point?
I'm sure at one stage or another next week that it'll probably be a draw in our game, and Millwall will have gone behind, and Blackburn will be behind, and we'll be thinking, we couldn't, could we? Possibly a little bit giddy off of a couple of pre-match pints, and it'll be an early couple of pre-match pints as well with the 12:30 kickoff. But there'll be a possibility, I'm sure, at one point, and then Haji Wright will go and score a brace, and then Matt Grimes will probably put a penalty away, and then it'll be 3 or 4, and it'll just become a bit of a laugh, really, about kind of where we're at and what this season's turned into. But apathy set in. I'm glad we've had a few laughs on this podcast because I needed it after yesterday. My mind and my head was it was like a recurring nightmare, just going back to that moment when Ryan Giles burst through the centre of the pitch, slightly diverted his run to the left flank, and I thought, this is it. What we all pined for. Nathan put in the groundwork in January, had a word in Giles' ear. He's going to whip this crossing, and we're going to get our big moment. And one of the balls that the Norwich defenders didn't clear, I think it went through Shane Duffy's legs. Unfortunately, it then just went through Dale Fry's legs because he's a centre-half with a dreadful goal-scoring record and is not even an attacking threat from our corners. So some real tactical inspiration there from Middlesbrough's coaching staff. And that is when I just thought, just get this season over and done with, and get the lads on holiday, and we can get a Tommy Conway's Diary of Portugal, and my levels of sort of excitement and levels of like just being able to bear seeing some of them will have restored by a couple of months' time. So yeah, Nathan, we will be back next week, of course, with our end of season awards, or potentially a playoff preview. I mean, that would be quite funny, both of which will be funny. But our end of season awards, and we'll try and keep it as humorous and as non-offensive as we can, and we'll look back on this season more so in moments than probably our gripes and our frustrations, because I don't think I've got it in me to get really wound up again by this group of players. So yes, unless there's anything else you want to add, Nathan, I'd just like to say for everyone, thank you very much for watching and listening throughout this season. I'll go on my spiel of thanking everyone again next week. But Yeah, it's been pretty grim on the pitch this season. So the fact that people have put themselves through not only watching the games, but also then plugging their earphones in or putting YouTube on and watching us or listening to us talk about it is unthinkable, really.
Yeah, it is. I don't know why people would put themselves through it more than once, if I'm honest. I don't know why we put ourselves through it more than
No,
once either.
no, I really don't. Maybe's commentary will be the final nail in the coffin for the podcast, and we'll just go, do you know what? We don't need this anymore. Who knows? But Nathan, thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for everyone for watching and listening. We'll be back next week. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.